From the liberal Northeast comes a lone voice of truth. Honest commentary in dishonest times. Think deeper with Juan Newsom. This is the Cure Radio Program. This is the Cure.
Okay, folks, we got a special guest tonight. He's been on the show before. He's been on Fox. He's all over the place. He's been on Fox and even some of your liberal stations. He is the president of Unhyphenated America. My friend Chris Harris. Chris, how are you doing?
Hey, good evening. Good to talk to you again, Juan.
Thanks, man. Thanks for coming on at such short notice. I know you're very busy, and so I really appreciate your time. Just to dive right in, because a lot has happened this week, I wanted to get your take. I mean, it's been a crazy week if you really look at, big picture. You had, this past week, the uncovering of some recordings of President Reagan and Nixon, the whole Jeffrey Epstein situation. The Ohio and ElPaso shootings. It's been a crazy week. Not necessarily a good or bad week for anybody. A lot of tragedies happened. But first, just going into those recordings for President Reagan and President Nixon, I just wanted to get your take on it because typically the liberal tactic would be for them to use these recordings as, proof that Republicans or conservatives are racist. But there is a context there. So I just wanted to get your perspective. I know you're one of the few people that would actually put it into proper context. What did you think?
Well, was it disappointing to hear? Yeah, it was disappointing to hear. Granted, this was 1971, and Ronald Reagan was governor of California at that time. And I know there are a lot of people, as I call them, your cousin and them, who they run with the narrative that Ronald Reagan was a racist, which, here's the thing, I said this on Fox, and it's funny because I got blasted by people for saying it, but I said, listen, every Republican president has been called a racist. Matter of fact, not even just every Republican president, every Republican is called a racist.
Yeah.
And if you're not white, and that's specific, obviously, every white Republican is called a racist. And if you're not white and you're a Republican, you're called a sellout. So it doesn't matter if you're Hispanic and Republican, if you're Asian and Republican, if you're black, if you're Republican, if you're gay and Republican, you're called a sellout. So at the end of the day, the narrative that they always try to point is that there's a particular way that you're supposed to speak based on your identity. Mm-hmm. But as far as Ronald Reagan goes, I'm not going to make any excuses for what he said. Mm-hmm. I do look at context. I do say, he was talking specifically about the African delegation who voted against recognizing, is it either Israel or, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember, either Israel or Taiwan, but they voted with China. And so he was upset about that. And so the comment he made was in regards to referring to them as monkeys and not wearing shoes. Was that a disappointing comment? Sure, it was a disappointing comment to hear. The thing I would say, and this is not to deflect, but it just kind of is what it is, it's called selective outrage, folks. Mm-hmm. If you're a leftist, here's the thing I say to you, you are full of selective outrage, because if I turn around and point out all the instances throughout the years where Democrats have said things of that ilk, you will sit there and you'll want to sweep it underneath the rug.
Yeah.
So am I going to rise to the occasion and get all bent out of shape? No. Because here's the thing. I know you don't have standards, Mr. Democrat. You don't have it. The only standards you have are double standards. Mm-hmm. Because we can go back and talk about while he was president, there's no recording, and who knows, maybe there might be a recording later on down the road, but to my knowledge, anyone's knowledge, there's no recording of President Reagan referring to blacks in any or Africans in any derogatory manner while he was president. So yes, he did it while he was governor. But guess what? We do know that Lyndon Baines Johnson, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, and I refer to him as President Big Daddy Pimpin' Johnson because he was a poverty and race pimp.
Yep.
We do know that he referred to blacks, American blacks, specifically American blacks, as the N-words on a regular basis.
Yep.
So, but nobody wants to talk about that, Juan. They want to judge LBJ by his actions. They all know that he referred to us as N-words on a regular basis. But they say, well, he did sign the Civil Rights Act. Okay,
Chris,
great.
I'll cement that further. I know a gentleman from Texas that he was in LBJ was his school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he said LBJ was racist as all get up back then when he was a school teacher. And so, if you look at, I did, detailed studies on Johnson. There's a series of biographies out on Johnson on LBJ. And it's like a 3-part series. It covers his time in Texas, and it covers, his time in early politics and his time in the Senate. And it also covers like his presidency. But I know a gentleman going back to his elementary days. But to get back to your point, they deflect. They're always talking about Republicans and conservatives being racist. Yet they don't acknowledge the racism, the blatant racism that are in their policies and in the Democratic politicians, the bigotry of low expectations, the racist comments that are said by different Democrats, like even Joe Biden, of course, like over the years, tons of racist comments, and there's no accountability for that. So
None whatsoever.
Absolutely nothing to say when some of these Democratic politicians say racist things. And you look at, and that goes to my next point, because we're talking about, policies. Look at some of the policies. Look at the racist policies of the day, like immigration reform. That's basically a policy that a lot of black liberals are signing off on that will replace them as the primary voting bloc of the Democratic Party. How racist is that?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people, there's a saying is like we as human beings, we tend to judge others according to their actions, but we judge ourselves according to our intent.
Yep.
So we always give ourselves a little slack, like, well, yeah, I might have said or done this and it hurt somebody's feelings, but I didn't intend on hurting anybody's feelings. So I can't be that bad of a person because I had good intent. Right. And that is, quite frankly, what they do with the left. That's what black folks do with the left, is they judge the left based on the alleged intentions instead of judging the left based on their actions. And it's amazing because when you really look at it, Juan, their actions have been horrible.
Yeah.
Or more specifically, the results of their actions have been horrible for blacks. Absolutely horrible.
Well, that goes into my next point, because I wanted to ask you about, and I've seen you talk about this subject on TV and on radio. Also, specifically, some of your Facebook posts for Unhyphenated America, you refer to the failures of the subculture of African Americanism. I wanted to get your take on what that is. I think I have a good idea, but I know a lot of people in my audience, they may not understand me trying to explain that. But I thought they would better hear it from the horse's mouth.
So when I break it down, see, you have to understand the genesis of this all. I come from a technical background. And so one of the things that I learned in my years in the IT field is that it's troubleshooting, right? When you're trying to identify, there's only a handful of reasons why this or that is not working. So, for example, if it comes to your computer, I mean, we will start with the basics. Is it plugged in, right? Because people will be like, they'll call and be like, well, my computer won't turn on. Well, is it plugged in, right?
Yep.
I mean, so my thought process is a logical, linear thought process. And some might say that it's more of a black and white. I don't think it's limited to being black and white, but you have to drill down. And so let's start with the definitions of things, because words matter.
Yep.
So we talk about things like culture. Well, what is culture? Culture is essentially an agreed upon set of norms, mores, values, and traditions held by a group of people, Juan. So I'll say that again. Culture is essentially a set of norms, mores, values, and traditions held by a group of people. And cultures, see, correct me if I'm wrong, you have siblings, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's funny because you were raised in a household with your mother and father where they created the culture. But see, once you and your wife, once you became grown and got married, you and your wife created a different culture.
Totally different culture.
Right. And so your siblings, they got married and they created a subculture. Now, hopefully, if you felt like your parents created a strong culture, you tried to stick as closely to the culture that your parents created, right? Agreed upon set of norms, mores, values, and traditions. So hopefully, if you were raised in a strong culture with your parents, then you looked for a wife that would be on board with you, and you guys would raise your kids in a similar culture. Right? But we all know that, I mean, isn't it amazing? Sometimes we look at our siblings, and it's sometimes like you meet somebody and it's like, wow, wait a minute, is that your brother? Is that your sister? And it's like, wow, how different are you and your sibling? So if there's a massive difference sometimes between siblings who are raised in the same household, if when they become grown, they decide to embrace these cultures, right? Because as an adult, you get to choose your culture. So if the cultures are different as adults between siblings, my God, what a difference between cousins, a whole nother generation.
Oh, yeah.
And so I tell you that, and I say that for your listeners so they can have an idea of the context. And so when I talk about the fact that everybody who's black is not of the same culture, and that's the number one mistake that we make, Juan, is we assume that everybody who's black is from the same culture.
Yeah.
See, like you're from Virginia and you're up there in the New York area, right?
Yeah.
You know, the culture of New Yorkers is crazy different from the culture of the South.
Oh, yeah.
But even the culture of the South, the Chesapeake Bay area, is vastly different from the culture of the deep down dirty South down there in Alabama, Mississippi, and all those places, right?
Yeah. Yes, a little bit of difference.
It's different.
Yeah.
And then we got the West Coast, right? Then you got the Midwest, Chicago. There's different culture. Now, if there are those differences, because sometimes things like geography lead to different cultures. So if geography and topography leads to differences in cultures, and then you throw in things like the difference in parents and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it's just ridiculous, Juan, to assume that because we have similar melanin content, that we automatically have the same cultural norms, values, and traditions and beliefs. But this is what people want us to believe, that everybody who's black comes from the same culture. So I tell you that cultures evolve over time, right? And I'll speak specifically of myself, I am the 6th generation of black Harrises. My 3 times great-grandfather was born on a plantation right down the road from where you're from, the Chesapeake area in Charles City, right? Charles City, Charles County down there in the Chesapeake area.
Yeah,
that's where my 3 times great-grandfather was born on a plantation in 1813. Okay, we were black. We were Negro, Afro-American, whatever you want. We were black. And my birth certificate says black. Right. But then you fast forward to today, and now all of a sudden we have this idea where we're calling ourselves African American. I was like 15 years old before anybody started using the African American term. So I was essentially grown. But here's the thing you have to point out. Culture is the issue. My parents, when you talk to people, my parents were born in the 50s in Detroit, and one of the things you talk to them and you say, "Hey, Dad, um, did everybody have a mother and father in the home when you were growing up?" My parents were like, "Oh yeah."
Yep.
On the street they grew up on, pretty much. I mean, you knew there was the one kid down the street who didn't have a daddy in the house, and that was something to almost be ashamed of.
Yep. Yeah,
But
it
you
was.
knew.
I remember that.
Yeah, everybody. Now, look, because I'm a military brat, literally, I can count on one hand the number of kids that I grew up and went to school with who did not have a mother and father in the home.
Wow.
And I'm 46. But see, because I grew up in a military environment, military culture. And so when I was coming up, the culture was still that of nuclear families. One of my best friends, yes, he had a stepfather. And I knew
Hmm.
several other people who had stepmothers or stepfathers, but there
Yep.
was a mother and a father in the home. So the
Wow.
culture that we grew up in as Black people, what a lot of folks don't know, post slavery, post emancipation, Blacks made a concerted, deliberate effort to reconstitute our families. Yes, yes, slavery happened. Yes, during slavery, the quote unquote evil white man, the slave owners, whatever you want to call them, yes, they did, just commit atrocities, heinous things, breaking apart families, separating them. But if you go and do your research, you'll find out that immediately following slavery, immediately following emancipation, those men, they left. I'll use my man, that dude, Booker T. Washington, his
Hmm.
stepfather, who was sold off to a plantation in West Virginia because he was born and raised in Western Virginia. But his stepfather was sold off to a plantation in West Virginia.
Hmm.
And when slavery ended, his stepfather came to get he and his brother and their mother and brought them to Malden, West Virginia. That story is repeated all over the place where you hear these stories and somebody says, "Hey, you know where the Jones plantation is or whatever plantation is?"
Yep.
Because there were people who were seeking out their families. And what you had within a decade after slavery, families were reconstituted. We
Wow.
knew it was important to bring our families back together. And what they don't talk about in the mainstream media, and what's a shame of what's happening within the Black community overall, you got kids born, like I got a young man that I'm mentoring now, right? He's 22 years old. I'm very proud of him. He got married at 21 years old,
Hmm.
which some people might say is too young, but is a sidebar, and I know I'm just running on and on, but I'll say this one. Here's what's interesting. We live in a culture today, a predominant culture today, where people will say, "Ooh, he too young to get married. He only
Hmm.
21 years old. They're too young to get married," right? But those very same people will be at a baby shower when some girl announces that she got knocked up by some random dude,
Exactly.
and they're throwing a baby shower for her. But so it's okay that she's a baby mama.
Yep. Yep.
But if she got married, she ain't too young to be a baby mama, but she's too young to be a wife.
Yep.
My mom and dad got married when they were 17 and 18 years old. Guess what? 50 years later, my parents are still married. I thank God that my parents maintained their commitment and worked things through. And so they raised my sister and I culture, in a culture that promoted marriage and strong traditional nuclear families.
Mm. Mm. So when you talk about, the lack of two parent homes, and you talk about the culture that being adopted that's more accepting of, single parent baby shower versus a traditional marriage. Is that what you mean by the subculture? Are there other aspects? And if so, what are the pillars of those aspects?
Well, I get pretty raw with it, and I refer to it as the wretched subculture of African Americanism.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a reason for it. It is a wretched subculture. It's not the predominant culture. It's a wretched subculture. Once again, going back from 1865 to 1965, that 100-year period, if you look at the stats, it started to rise right around 1945, 1950. The out of wedlock birth rate started to rise to a point wherein Daniel Patrick Moynihan, he was he was Health and Human Services or whatever. He used to be
Well, he
forgotten
was
whatever cabinet level position before he became a U.S. senator.
he worked for several cabinets. He worked
Exactly.
under Nixon, and he worked under Johnson, and he has this report out, the Moynihan Report.
Yes.
And it describes the conditions of the African American family before and after LBJ's Great Society, and he immediately picked up on the results as it was negatively affecting the trend of two-family homes because of the incentive to receive those benefits as a single parent. He automatically picked that up. It actually, when you look at the LBJ policy, it actually created poverty in the black community when you really look at that data. It's astounding that no one points this out.
Well, I mean, if you go and do research, one of the things you'll realize is that FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, his Treasury Secretary, which I believe was, oh goodness, I was just about to say his name. It'll come to me later on. But his Treasury Secretary made it clear that all the efforts that the Roosevelt administration had used to try to help get rid of the Great Depression, it didn't do anything. He says basically we've been spending money and things are worse than they were before.
Yep, absolutely.
And it was Henry Morgenthau. Wow, Henry Morgenthau, and there's a quote from him where he basically says we've been spending and everything's gotten worse. And so what happened is that the left started pushing. You had the first progressive. You got to see. It's kind of hard to break this down simply. You kind of have to give a holistic history lesson on the first progressive president, which is Woodrow Wilson, who was a blatant racist. Right, but everybody wants to cut him slack. But Woodrow Wilson was the first of the progressive Democrats, and every Democrat since then. And look, progressive is nothing more than code word for socialist. Okay, let's just that's why I refer to them as leftist, regressive, socialist-minded people. And so the policies were there, and they actually created incentives to break up the family. But prior to using LBJ specifically, the out of wedlock birth rate, single parent household rate in blacks was less than 20% before LBJ got into power, and by the time 1965 rolled around, it was at 22 or 23%. Well, wow. You fast forward 1986, because there's a special, CBS did a special. You will never see CBS today doing the kind of special they did back then. It was called The Vanishing Black Family. You can Google it. You'll see it on YouTube. The Vanishing Black Family. Just look up 1986 CBS special, The Vanishing Black Family, and you'll see that here it is roughly 21 years later. One generation later, the out of wedlock birth rate had exploded from roughly 23 or 24% up to 55%. So it doubled in one generation. Why? Because of the incentives. And what it did is it created a subculture based off of cultural Marxism. You'll see me use that term a lot, cultural Marxism. When you understand, because economic Marxism didn't work. All the people who were followers of Marx understood quickly, because Marx figured that his idea would take root in industrialized nations. He did not expect that it was going to take root in a backwater nation like the Soviet Union, like Russia. Russia was a backwater nation. Oddly enough, it also took root in China, another backwater nation. Marx intended for Marxism, for his economic model, to take root in places like the United Kingdom and the United States that were already industrialized societies. But the reason why it didn't take root is because capitalism and free enterprise was actually raising people up above poverty, raising people above the standard that they and their family had lived for generations, for millennia. So what they knew is they had to introduce another way, and so they started looking at this to attack the culture. And I'll forgive me, Ron, I'll run with this real quick, because you have to understand who influenced Marx. You had men like Robert Owen, who was a British industrialist who came to the United States in 1825 and started his own commune, if you will. He and his merry band of socialists came from the UK. He was a very wealthy man, and he wanted to implement his plan. They called themselves socialists. They couldn't implement it in the United Kingdom, so they said, hey, where can we go? We can do this. Well, the United States in 1825 was still wide open, especially west of the Mississippi River, or west of the Appalachians, I should say more specifically. So they bought an existing town, a place called they named it New Harmony, Indiana. Google that, New Harmony, Indiana. Robert Owen and his merry band of socialists bought an existing town, a literal turnkey town. That there was over 100 buildings there. It was there on fertile land. The land had already been tilled and everything like that. There was a river nearby. Everything you could need. He and his merry band of socialists moved there, and within 2 years, it failed, and they were starving. But here's what you need to know, and I want your listeners to really pick up on this, because if you understand this and then you start looking at everything that's taken place since then, you'll be like, oh my God. See, with Robert Owen, the three core beliefs of Robert Owen's group, number one, was the end of traditional religion, specifically Christianity. They weren't anti-Buddhist, they weren't anti-Islam, they were anti-Christian. They felt, because they were part of this age of enlightenment, they felt that man was growing and man was becoming enlightened, but the only thing stopping man from being all he could be is we have to get rid of this restriction of religion, specifically the Christian religion. So that was the number one thing, to get rid of traditional religion, specifically Christianity. Number two was to get rid of the traditional family structure, because they were the first feminists. They felt like women were being subjected by traditional family structures, oppressed rather by traditional family structures. So we got to get rid of this man and woman, husband and wife family structure. In order for women to grow to be all they can be, we got to get rid of that. So kids would not be raised by a mother and father who were husband and wife. They'd be raised communally, right? And so women will be free to be all they could be, right? To get out from under the foot of patriarchy, right? So that's number two, the end of traditional family structures. And number three was the end of private property rights. Because they figured, hey, you know what? As long as there's private property rights, then one individual might end up having more than other people. And that's not fair. And we're trying to be more fair. So folks, let's recap this. Number one, the end of traditional religion, specifically Christianity. Number two, the end of traditional family structures. And number three, the end of private property rights. Does that sound familiar to you today? Yeah. Have you seen that message anywhere today?
It's the 2019 Democratic Party primary.
Yeah, exactly.
And their platform. I mean, the Democratic Party platform. And I'll go back even further than that, because I read about the early Pilgrims experimenting with socialism. The early Pilgrims, when they came over to the country, they also experimented with, collectivism, trying to share the crops and to share what was produced. And what happened, some people stopped working.
Well, not even just the Pilgrims in the Northeast, but right there in your neck of the woods, your family neck of the woods, in the Jamestown settlement. See, folks, you got to understand this, is that the Jamestown settlement right now, in the area of the Chesapeake area, the land, the soil is a dark, rich soil, rich with nutrients where you can grow a lot of different crops. It's got a fairly temperate climate, so you can grow a lot of different crops, right? The forest around the Chesapeake Bay area is full of wild game, turkey, deer.
It is.
All the things that you want to. This is in 2019. All that's there with as much. There's over 1 million people, probably 2 or 3 million people in the Chesapeake Bay area. And yet the water is teeming with fish and crab and everything like that. So if it's like that today, after we've done a lot of damage over the years and we've kind of cleaned it up, we've done all that damage, we've cleaned it up, and today the soil is still fertile. Today,
I can only imagine.
What was it like then? So what was stopping them from being successful in Jamestown 400 years ago? Mindset.
I can only imagine.
100% mindset.
I can only imagine because I've been, I'm from that area, and I've been hunting with my father and fishing and crapping in that area. And, it was very rare that we came home with a light catch. So I can only imagine back in those days. This is just a reminder. I have a sponsor. We want to give out a shout out to food insurance folks. are you prepared for disaster? It could strike at any time. If it struck, what would you eat? Get food insurance today. Look, they have military meals, they have survival gear, they have water storage, emergency food for any situation, meals, fruits, vegetables, meats, beans and rice, dairy and drinks, even snacks and dessert. So give them a call, 1-866-946-8366, and you can contact them on foodinsurance.com. Okay, so back to Jamestown.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you had the Jamestown settlement. There was plenty of food, and this is why I say, listen, you can take a leftist, regressive, socialist-minded person, and you can put them in a super Walmart. Mm-hmm. Lock them in a super Walmart. What's inside of a super Walmart? Everything.
Everything you can imagine.
Yeah. But
that's why you go there and you spend more money than you plan to spend.
So you could lock them inside of a super Walmart, and within a week or two, they'll probably starve to death. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that's what happened with the Jamestown settlement. That's what's happened in Venezuela. Venezuela, once again, the ocean is still full of fish off the coast of Venezuela. Yeah, the forest is still full of wild game.
The ground is full of gas.
Yeah, the ground is full of gas. It's still full of gold. They're still full of fertile soil. Why are they starving in Venezuela? It's because of leftist, regressive, socialist ideology. It's because of cultural Marxism. It's because of the culture of an agreed upon set of norms, mores, values, and traditions. So when we circle back and I talk about the wretched subculture of African Americanism, I'm talking about those of us who are descendants of the slaves brought from Africa, right? Or some people might say American descendants of slaves. It's those of us who decided to embrace leftist, regressive, socialist ideology. We decided to, instead of having fathers in the home, we decided to have big daddy government. Mm-hmm. And all that's happened is it's destroyed our culture. It's created Baltimore. It's created Detroit. Mm-hmm. The Detroit that my parents grew up in is not the Detroit that we see today. Yeah. Everybody had a father in the home. But once again, one of the young men that I've been mentoring who's from the Buffalo area, or Rochester area rather, Rochester, New York, he'll tell you that he literally, when I asked him, I said, hey, how many of the kids that you grew up with had a mother and a father in the home? He sat there and scratched his head for a second trying to figure out who did he know who grew up with a mother and father in the home. See, that's one generation removed. In one generation, we went from most of us having, more than half of us having a mother and father in the home to now it's the idea like, oh, well, who has a mother and father in the home? Why is that even necessary? Mm-hmm. And it's had a terribly detrimental and deleterious effect on young black males in particular, because they're growing up without father figures. They're growing up without the example of manhood. Mm-hmm. It's one thing, okay, for girls, at least they grow up and they see that their mom is this strong black woman. But what do boys see?
Yeah, yeah. Do you think what role does the entertainment culture and education play in this? Because I see them playing a big factor. I see culture. There's a lot of things that happen before we get to the politics. I feel like there's a push from the culture, and the direction of our culture determines our politics. And what we get policy-wise is literally the poop coming out of the dog. That's just the way I see it. And so I see African Americans, I see blacks, for example, they're so easily manipulated by the culture, by entertainers, by, MSNBC commentators. All of these figures, I see a lack of, I want to say critical thinking, but I feel like there's like an emotional soul tie there, and it's just so easy to sway them. It's so frustrating as a conservative to see this. So I just
absolutely. It is. I mean, what's funny that we joke about it, but watching horror movies, right? Scary movies. Mm-hmm. And, we joke about, say, oh, that's white folk stuff, right? Because you're like, why is a white person going in? Why are you going into the scary house? You know what I'm saying? Why are you going into the woods? Don't you know? And, and black folks, we watch the movie and we're like, no, don't go in there, right? And I'm sitting there laughing because, like, we do the same thing with politics.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We go into the scary house. We're like, don't you know? No, we're like, run, right? And yet they go in. And they don't understand that, this is what's going to happen. We know the game. I mean, they talk about us and they talk about the president blowing the racist dog whistle or so on and so forth. I'm like, no. Here's the real dog whistle. Anytime somebody points the finger at anything that's going wrong, they say, oh, that's racist. But, thank God we have social media. Because think about this. If it wasn't for Fox News and social media, two of the very few outlets out there, we would never hear the realities about, where you have black folks out there who are saying, yeah, it's true. Things suck in the community. We're sick and tired of things sucking the way they do. Because you're not going to, the mainstream media is not going to put a microphone in the face of those black residents who will sit there and say, you know what? Elijah Cummings hasn't done anything for us.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because after those comments, you had, on social media, conservative talk radio was big in, giving voice to some of the people in the Baltimore area. You had a whole array of comments from residents there, talking about how Elijah Cummings had been in office for years and years and haven't done nothing there. Yet you had a group of conservatives to actually go to Baltimore and to clean a lot of that trash up. I mean, you're talking about 20-year-old trash. In some instances, it was ridiculous. It was really ridiculous, the whole Baltimore thing. And I'm glad our president took the time to highlight some of that stuff because it doesn't get talked about. I volunteered in some of the communities here in New Jersey, and it's just bad. There's no Republicans around. No matter who's in office, they're blaming Republicans. If there's Republicans in control of the state government, they're blaming Republicans in Washington, or they're blaming Republicans in the state government. If there's no Republicans around, they're blaming Republicans in Washington, D.C. And so, Baltimore, Detroit, places like that, Washington, D.C., where the capital is, there's a lot of minorities suffering there as well. So I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad the president took the time to, highlight some of these things. They don't get talked about. And meanwhile, our people, they just keep going back for more. I mean, they their voting habits don't change.
Oh, well, you get what you vote for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's it. At the end of the day, you get what you vote for. I mean, and they're not going to change. There's absolutely no reason for them to change. We always say it's like, why buy the cow when you get the milk for free? Yeah. Democrats have gotten the milk for free. They have not had to put any effort in, right? Because we can look at what the president when President Obama was in there. How much attention did he pay to the black community? None.
He
Except
paid all
for basically saying, it's time for y'all to get up and vote.
Yep.
But yet, what did he spend? He spent 95% of his time catering to the LGBT community.
Yep.
I refer to them as the LGBT QRSTUVWXYZ mafia. So he spent 95% of his time catering to the LGBT community, and 4% of his time catering to illegal aliens.
Yeah.
And black folks got like 0.1% of his time, except when it came time to get up there and do his best Al Green impression and come and eat with black folks and eat fried chicken and everything like that to show that he was down. Otherwise, he paid no mind to black folks.
Obama was more interested in implementing socialism than he was trying to solve some of those issues in the black community. He was the most uninterested president, I would say, that I've seen in my lifetime, as it pertains to issues in the minority community, people that are here legally. That's what I put it.
Well, I mean, there was no need for him to show interest. Remember, he was the first black clean cut, right? The whole thing that Joe Biden said, it was like, yeah, storybook, man. He's the first clean cut black person with no Negro dialect unless he chose to, that kind of stuff, man. And they knew he was going to get 95% of the black vote.
Yeah.
And I don't know if
he got 99.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he got 98, 99%.
Crazy.
I mean, it's and what's interesting is that I was talking to a few people. Maybe you've had this happen, but I've had it. Like one of my frat brothers was telling me, he's down there in Atlanta, and he was telling me, he says, man, I was riding the MARTA in Atlanta. He says, there's a guy, and this guy doesn't know that he's a Republican or conservative, but he's like, talk to this black guy, and he's like, and the guy, he sees him all the time on the metro. The guy, he says, man, he leaned into him. He says, man, Obama didn't do blank for black people. And this is funny because this is like in the last year or so, right? And then I said, man, I've had almost the exact same situation. I was at the grocery store across the street from where my wife and I live. This older brother, probably in his 50s, chit chat with him. And once again, I didn't tell him that I'm, he had no idea that I'm this big conservative guy. We were just having a conversation. And he basically says, Obama didn't do blank for black folks. And I'm like, I wonder, and I've talked to a few other friends, and they've said the same thing. Once again, people who didn't know they're conservative, other black folks are kind of leaning in, whispering, saying Obama didn't do anything for black folks. And so what they're quietly realizing, that Obama and the DNC does not care, did not and does not care about black folks, because, my God, look at everything they've been catering to. The Congressional Black Caucus, for the love of God, you got John Lewis, whose claim to fame is he took a whooping from white Democrats, right? I mean, think about that. Why do we know who John Lewis is? Because John Lewis got whooped up on by white Democrats back in the 60s. And that's why he's this cultural icon. But that joker turned around and joined and is a sycophant for the exact same people who whooped his behind.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So
you could almost say they whooped him into shape.
Yeah, they whooped him into shape. And so then he ended up saying, remember John Lewis said, I'll go to jail for these illegal aliens. Bro, your doggone district is like 60% black. I ain't never heard you say that you'll go to jail for your black constituents. But all of a sudden, because your masters told you to, you jumped, I'll go to jail for them. Who asked you to go to jail for them? Yeah. You volunteered that. You had Elijah Cummings, his rat infested. This dude, it's on record himself saying that his district is rat infested. But all of a sudden, when Trump calls him out, because he wasn't the first person to say it, Trump calls it out as, oh, that's racist. And yet, black folks, you vote. Listen, if you vote for any congressional black caucus type, you deserve everything that you get.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not a single. Okay, you know the DC area, and you got the Prince George's County, and I used to have to go over there for work, and it was interesting to me because here during election season you got all the signs out there, vote for so and so for county commissioner or state rep or whatever like that, and I'm just laughing because I found myself thinking, what the heck difference does it make? Who the new county commissioner is. If it's in Prince George's County, they're going to be an African-American Democrat. There's not a hill of beans worth of difference, right? There's not a frog hair's worth of difference between one African-American Democrat and the other. They're all going to get in office and do the exact same thing.
Yep.
Ultimately, they're going to say, we need more. And look, here's the answer for everything. We need more federal funds.
Exactly.
Right?
Oh,
we
my
need
God.
more federal funds. And look, what did the mayor of Baltimore, who replaced the mayor who had to resign because she was going to go to jail. What did the new mayor say in response to the criticism from President Trump? Well, the president shouldn't be criticizing. He should be trying to redirect more federal funds. What? Dude, we was just asking you. You've been getting $200 million a year for a decade. Where's the money? Or look, what did Cardi B say? Where's my monies, right? Remember Cardi B? Where's my monies? We send you to jail. You be getting one jumpsuit and 2 underwears. I want to see receipts. Where's my monies?
I'm gonna tell you what the monies are. The monies are in the pockets of their private contractor cronies that come in and they loot the city treasury for an unlimited amount of cash. It's a joke. It's a joke. I mean, we experienced the same thing here in Newark when Cory Booker was mayor, in the education system and also in City Hall. The answer for them is always more money. They can't handle what they have, and their cronies, their private contractors that they pay to do certain city services, they fleece them out of money and they keep them in power. It's a money laundering operation, basically.
Well, look at Baltimore. I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with what happened in Baltimore with the schools, but this past winter, there was documentation or evidence rather showing the kids in Baltimore schools, they had to wear their overcoats in the winter because they couldn't keep the heat on in the buildings.
That is crazy.
So your kids are in this environment where they're freezing, wearing their winter coat in the classroom, right? And they didn't have money though. The school couldn't just say, hey, it's a budget crisis. Budget's tight, times are tight. We got to squeeze our belt. But yet, what's this guy's name? He was one of the Black Lives Matter people, DeRoy or something. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but they hired him. They hired someone who's supposed to help improve the education system in Baltimore, one of the Black Lives Matter people. And because I think he used to work for the Harlem School or whatever like that. I think they're paying him like $160,000 a year. I'm like, did you really need him? I think you probably could have got the heat turned on in the school for $165,000. I think the kids would probably learn better if they weren't sitting there freezing. So how about we just start with that? How about having the heat actually work in the schools?
God.
But how about this? How about Baltimore such a failure that they had 4 schools in the Baltimore City School District, Juan, 4 schools last year where not one single student passed the state standardized test.
That is crazy.
Now, each school had roughly 1,000 students because I think 2 of them are high schools and 2 of them are junior high schools off the top of my head. So think about this. I'm like, so you trying to tell me that y'all ain't got a single nerd in the school? You ain't got a geek? Not a single curve wrecker?
That is crazy.
4 schools where not a single student. Come on, man. Not a single student passed the test? Come on, man. Not a single student? But yet, okay, because their Democrat masters ordained it, somehow last year when there was a big, anti-gun violence march, the school district was able to come up with the money to bus a bunch of students from Baltimore down to Washington, D.C. to take part in the march.
That is crazy.
So let me get this straight. Y'all can afford to bus people to D.C. to take part in the march, but you can't keep the lights on? You can't keep the heat on?
Priorities.
Here's the reality. It's priorities, Juan. It's priorities. And it's the teachers union is terrible. The teachers union is not a friend of black folks. I'm just going to put it out there.
Yep.
The teachers union is not a friend of black folks. They care more about the teachers themselves and raising their salaries, which is amazing because the state of Maryland, for example, has the 5th or 6th ranked public school system in the entire country. So one of the top 5 or 6 schools out of 50 states, think about it, the state of Maryland has either the 5th or 6th ranked public school system in the entire country. I think they have 27 school districts off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But you know who the 2 bottom school districts are out of those 27? The very worst is the Baltimore City school system.
Wow.
And the second from the bottom is Prince George's County. You know, Prince George's County, which is everybody's so proud to say is the wealthiest, predominantly black county in the country.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. Y'all, your school sucks. You got all these people, your cousin and them, who went to HBCUs, you know, husband and wife, both GS 13, 14, 15, each of them making $100,000 a year. You got matching his and hers Mercedes, but your schools suck.
Mm-hmm.
What you gonna do? You gonna blame it on not enough spending? Hey, guess what? You spend more. And in terms of spending, Baltimore and Prince George's County from the school districts, they're middle of the pack. So basically, there are the schools that spend less, the school districts in Maryland that spend less, do better than the schools like Baltimore City and Prince George's County. So is it really the need to spend more money, Juan?
No,
it's culture, my brother. It's 100% culture.
I look at now just from the way you explain the subculture, African Americanism. You know, I came up with some pillars of my own, and correct me if I'm wrong. When you look at the education pillar, you know, the education system, what it's doing and what it's not doing, more so indoctrinating than educating. You look at the entertainment pillar, you know, some of the garbage that's being recycled and inputted into our children. You also look at, you know, how you look at the breakdown of the African American family, you know, single family homes, single family moms, dysfunctional cultures within the home. And then, you know, the fourth pillar to me obviously is the bent towards how you know, the black community views the role of government. More spending, more money, more this, more that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh yeah, I mean it's always Democrats haven't seen a problem yet that couldn't be solved with more money. The problem is that you have corrupt cultures, and so you know if you have a hole in your pocket, does it matter how much money you pour in? The money's just going to fall out. Mm-hmm. But the hole is the culture. The hole is we as a community, I'll say, and you know, I consider myself to be an American black man. I mean, I always tell people, listen, if you see me on TV, I don't have to tell you that I'm black. I mean, I got this big old black nose and these black lips, and I got a permanent tan. I don't have to tell you that I'm black. I don't have to tell you that I'm a descendant of somebody at some point in my history who came from Africa. My culture is American. Mm-hmm. And you know how I know my culture is American? Because I spent enough time around Africans to know that they've let me know throughout my life. Because I grew up, we used to interact with Africans when I was growing up in Germany, and they let it be known we weren't African. Right? Yep. I've been around a bunch of Africans when I was here. I was in a relationship with an African girl for a long time. They made it clear I'm not African. And so it's crazy that you got folks trying to identify as African. Our culture is not African. Our culture is American. When people refer to themselves as African American, here's what they're doing, Juan. What they're doing is they're actually embracing the worst aspects of traditional African paganism and combining it with the worst Africans of, you know, the worst aspects of that poor white trash cracker culture, as Thomas Sowell talks about it. They're taking those two aspects, combining it, and creating a wretched subculture of African Americanism. The wretched subculture, it's a failure culture. Okay, if your culture doesn't begin and end with a traditional nuclear 2-parent family household, your culture sucks.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's just put it out there.
Yeah, which leads to stability, which leads to prosperity. I mean, you look at, you know, I look at there's this whole big push for reparations, which to me personally is offensive. Now, like you, I work in technology, I work in IT, and I'm in management now, and a lot of meetings, I'm the only black person in there, but I see people, a lot of my colleagues, nothing against them. I just see African Americans missing out on opportunities. Americans, period. Now, there's white Americans, in these meetings, and in these corporations, but there are people from India, from China, and from Eastern Europe that's flooding into the American information technology field. And there's a lot of times where, like I said, I'm the only black person in the room. Hey,
been there, done that, brother. Been there, done that. Yeah.
And I'm looking around like, okay, Negroes are talking about reparations, man. Y'all better come in here and get some of these 6-figure jobs, because
get this money, man. Let's get this money.
Because people from my Indian friends and my friends from China, and when I was in grad school or whatever, I met a lot of people from India and China, and they are on it. They are on it. I went and studied for my master's. Some of my friends from India and China, they got their PhDs already. Like they're in it for the money, dude. And when I'm at work, I'm there. I'm in management or whatever. I'm on the same level as a lot of these top guys. But like I said, I'm the only black dude there. So.
Man, listen, Juan, like I said, I work in the technology field also, man, and I look around and I always joke, I laugh about your cousin and them complaining about the evil white man. And I'm like, let me get this straight. See, because there's quite a few black folks who are, to use the term light-skinned, right? I've seen a whole lot of light-skinned black folks, right, who complain about the evil white man and how the evil white man won't let them get ahead. Meanwhile, I've been working in the technology field for 20 years, and I've seen some real dark-skinned Indians, right? The only difference is they have wavy hair or they have straight hair, but they're darker. Many of them are darker than you and I, and yet they're getting this money. They're making 6 figures. Here's some numbers for you, what people don't realize. Indians from East Asia, right? East Asian Indians from the Indian subcontinent have the highest median household income in the United States of America. Any ethnic group.
Yep.
By far. See, check it out, folks. The median household income for America is roughly $60,000 a year, right?
Yep.
So all Americans, all 350 million of us roughly, the median household income, and I think there's 150 million or whatever the number of households there are, but of all the households, half of the households make over 60,000 and half make under 60,000 of all households in America. Now, keep in mind, you got Jeff Bezos' household with, $100 billion net worth, and you got those people who are dirt poor. But half of the households make over 60 and half make under 60, regardless of ethnicity. But let's talk about East Asian Indians. Their median household income of the roughly 3 million, there's roughly 3 million East Asian Indians in the United States right now, people of that descent. Of those 3 million, half make over 122,000 and half make under. So think about it. Half make over 122,000. Right? Now, what's the median household income among white Americans? It's 66,000. So the median household income for East Asian Indians is nearly double that of the average white household. But what is it for blacks? It's 36,000. So East Asian Indians, many of them are darker than you and I, but their household income is nearly 4 times. Well, what would be the reason for that? Maybe what they do to earn money. Ask yourself this question, Juan, and have your listeners think about this. I really want y'all to think about this. Because I can go into Joe Biden mode, right, and say that you can't go into a 7-Eleven without run across an Asian person, right? Isn't that what Joe Biden said? But ask yourself this question. When is the last time that you met somebody who was Indian, who was not either in the IT field as an engineer or something like that, something to do in the technology sector, or a doctor or nurse,
Mm-hmm.
or a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah.
When have you met an Indian who was anything other than one of those three?
They're hungry, bro. They're hungry, bro. They come here, and they get, they go for the education. They go to the best schools. You know, they have, I've studied, I've had study sessions with, in grad school with some of my Indian and Chinese friends, and their study habits are different. They stay hungry, bro. They stay hungry.
You know what it is? Hold on, Juan. Let's run with the narrative that your cousin and them want to give themselves as their excuse, right? They want to give the excuse that the reason why those Indians are doing so well is because of they get money from back home, like the government gives them those loans. Well, you and I both know that's a lie from the pit of hell.
Yeah.
What they do is they do pool their money with their extended family.
Yep.
They do pool their money within their community. They get loans within their community. They're not getting loans from the bank. There's no one giant entity who's sitting there giving them a bunch of money. And they say, well, yeah, but it's the ones who are coming here are the best of the best. Okay, fine. If the ones who are coming here are the best of the best, and their median household income is over 122,000, what's the median household income for the best of the best among blacks?
Yep.
We've been here all this time. Do we match up? Here's the difference. The difference is they're going to school and they're studying the STEMs, period. You ain't never seen an East Asian Indian going to school to get a degree in gender studies. Their mom or daddy would slap the teeth out of their mouth if they said, Mom and Dad, I want to get a degree in gender studies.
Nope. That's not happening.
Not going to happen. But when black folks go to college, what do we study? I got the numbers, man. The problem among blacks is that when we do go to college, we don't study the fields that make money. So when people sit there and they make the false equivalent one and they talk about, well, it's nothing but racism, because they'll point at a college-educated black person or black household of two college-educated black people, and they'll compare it against a college-educated household of two white people, and the white people will be like, okay, we'll say their median household income is 100 grand, and the black folks is like 60 grand. They'll say, see, that's racism. Hold on a second, partner. Slow your roll. What'd you get your degree in? Number one, what school did you go to? And number two, what'd you get your degree in? See, because if you went to an HBCU like Bowie State, right? I'm not trying to bash HBCUs, but let's just be real. The requirement to get into most HBCUs is much lower than it is to get into a normal state school. So if you went to Bowie State, which probably has an SAT requirement of like a 900 score, right? And you studied so the man studied African American studies, and the woman and the wife went to Bowie State and studied sociology. So they both have college degrees, right? And they're comparing themselves to a white couple who maybe the husband went to University of Maryland and got a degree in engineering, and the wife went to American University and got a degree in whatever she got her degree in, business. Do you really think that people who came out of Bowie State with degrees in sociology and African American studies are going to come out and get job offers anywhere close to somebody who came out of Maryland and American University with degrees in engineering and business? Are you for serious, man? Are you seriously trying to say that there's an equivalence just because you both have a bachelor's degree? Man, all bachelor's degrees are not equal. All colleges are not equal, and all bachelor's degrees are not equal. So quit trying to play that game and just say, I got a degree and you got a degree. How come we're not making the same money? There's no demand for people with African American studies degrees. There's no demand for sociology degrees. There is a demand for engineering degrees.
Well, they have social justice majors too now. So, I don't know. They have social. Oh, speaking of that, Chris, I have to give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors. One of our sponsors tonight is Hillsdale College. It's a private institution, non-government funded, located in Hillsdale, Michigan. They have traditional majors there. They have politics and law, military and public service, sciences and engineering, even professional sports and athletic majors. But folks, I want you to go to Hillsdale College website and check out some of their free courses. They do this. They just ask that you consider giving them a small donation. They have courses such as the Constitution 101 course. I've taken a course. It's a great course. They have Economics 101. They have other courses to add on to that for history. They even have a course on the Federalist Papers, folks. So I want you to check their website out. Go to hillsdale.edu. Thank you. Now back, Chris, we're talking about colleges.
Well, what are we doing to provide value? See, this is the free market, man. We could go on and talk about this.
We can go all night.
The free market, man. Yeah, we could be here for a while, man. Because I just saw something come across my screen. The rapper Akon, supposedly I don't know if there's truth to this, but I just saw a meme come across that said Akon provided solar power for 600 million people in Africa. It makes you wonder what all these charities have been doing in the past 30 years. See, that right there, I wonder if you gave Akon access to $2.1 billion. If this man has the heart for giving, this man has the heart for actually trying to improve the lives of his fellow Africans, and he was able to provide. Listen, what if it's not 600 million? What if it's only 60 million? What if it's not 60 million? What if it's only 6 million? Look, what if it's 600,000? If he provided electrical power through solar power to 600,000 Africans. So even if the number is inflated, even if it's nowhere near 600 million, it's actually 600,000, he's done more in a handful of years, in a decade. He's done more for more black folks in a decade than the Congressional Black Caucus has done since 1971. Electrical power is key. That you can begin to really take part in free enterprise. Your children don't have to read by candlelight, or not even candlelight. Sometimes, maybe they're burning animal dung, because guess what? In a lot of these third world countries, children are dying because at night, once again, there's no electricity. So what are they using to fuel? If they don't have wood around, they're using things like animal dung, and they're burning that inside the home. And that's what they're using to have light inside the house. Do you understand the power of power? that what can help to lift entire countries out of poverty is just having access to electrical power. See, they want it. I work with a bunch of Africans. I work with a bunch of African guys, and I'm talking about in business, because I'm an entrepreneur outside of my full-time work, and I have people who are from Liberia, people from the Ivory Coast, people from Senegal, not Senegal, but Benin, people from Benin, Ivory Coast, Liberia, and these places, and some of them, like I said, they grew up basically very third world. And so they really appreciate all the things that we have access to in America. And they want to be able to take the free enterprise system to Africa. You know what I want to do? I want to take the free enterprise system to Baltimore. I want to take the free enterprise system to Detroit. We got to get rid of the Elijah Cummings. We got to get rid of the John Lewis. We need to introduce black folks to free enterprise.
They don't experience it. From my experiences, and I do a lot of business with people from the Caribbean, and in Africa, and as well, I'm an entrepreneur outside of this. And when I go to, I've in certain places, in certain inner cities, I've worked with economic groups, and I've tried to restructure some things there economically, and it's that much harder. Some of these inner cities, and here's the thing about Baltimore, Newark, New Jersey, places like Richmond, California, and Detroit, places like that, there is no free enterprise. It's literally a socialist hellhole. There's corruption, there's cronyism, it's hard to start a business, there's rules and regulatory red tape, you got to bribe people. It's literally, they have no access to free enterprise because of the elected officials there that they've elected to that were supposed to look out for their best interests. Instead, they're getting rich and oppressing them and keeping them, erecting a barrier between them and a free enterprise system. It's an amazing thing to see, but you have to really be in touch with the minutia, policy-wise. Now, I was working on a project where, in this one inner city, that I was trying to bring a Walmart to the area, and there was space for it. And just to give you an example, and man, I got fought. People were coming after me left and right because I tried to get this Walmart here. Because the people there see Walmart. People complain about Walmart and how it puts suppliers out of business and the whole history. That was going to happen anyway because of the cost. But Walmart is good for people in the lower and middle classes. It's good for their pockets, especially super Walmarts. And what I saw was people in this particular area that didn't have access to good grocery store and to good and to good goods, So they needed something to alleviate their pockets, because you go to these small businesses sometimes, you go to these bodegas, or you go to these, side shops, and they're paying surcharge.
Mm-hmm.
And so, man, you should have saw it, Chris. You should have saw my wife's face. I was there, and then they fought me, and I was trying to really bring a Walmart there, but there was just so many regulatory barriers. There were so many political barriers. And so a lot of these, a lot of these minority communities, they do not have access to capitalism. And that's really a shame. That's really one of the main problems there.
Well, you know what it is? I don't know if you saw, I got into a discussion. I'm not going to call it an argument. I don't really argue with people. I mean, I let people say and feel whatever you want to feel. I have the facts, and so you can live in your feelings. But there was a lady who was trying to argue with me about saying that, well, black folks don't have access to capital, and she was saying this in regards to when I talked about, and maybe you remember this or not, but I said that there's roughly 55,000 hotels in the United States, and hotels and motels. So basically everything from the, come on in Roach Motel to a Ritz Carlton, right? Mm-hmm. And most people don't know, a lot of those franchises, even if it's a Ritz Carlton or a Holiday Inn, yes, some of them are corporate owned, but many of them are actually franchised out. Yeah, because franchising is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States that goes beyond McDonald's. It includes hotels, right? So of the roughly 55,000 hotels in the United States, about 22,000, roughly 40% of all the hotels in the United States are owned by Indians. Mm-hmm. Now, this is amazing considering the fact that in 1985, there was only a couple 100,000 Indians in the United States. It wasn't until the late 90s when the immigration laws were relaxed that allowed Indians to come here in any significant numbers, and they came here and they pooled their money, and they came here and said, hey, this is a land of opportunity. I couldn't have opportunity back home in India, so what I'll do is I want to own a business. And what do? They decided, hey, you know what, I'll buy up a mom and pop hotel or whatever like that, and my family and I, we will take care of cleaning that hotel. We'll sleep in the back. There'll be 12 of us living here, but we'll own this hotel. We'll buy it outright, and then we'll buy another one and buy another one, and so on and so forth. And that's what they've done. That's why they call them patels, right? Mm-hmm. If you look, and you'll see a lot of those East Asian Indian-owned hotels are owned by somebody whose last name is Patel. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean it's owned by the same people. There's a bunch of Patels out there. Mm-hmm. Roughly 40% of all the hotels are owned by East Asian Indians. So for 22,000, there's only 600 black-owned hotels in the entire United States. Black folks own 600 of the 55,000. We've been here all this time. So once again, don't try to blame it on the evil white man. Don't try to blame it on racism, because many of those Indians are darker than you and I. So, and I always say like this, the quote unquote evil white man that you're talking about, do you really think he likes Indians any more than he likes black folks?
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the British kept Indians as slaves. The Brits treated Indians like crap. So don't sit there and act like the evil white man has any more love for Indians than he does for black folks, but it didn't matter to Indians because they came here and said, here's opportunity. And so now they own 40% of all the hotels. How do they do that? They pool their resources. Capital begins between your ears. So you cannot say that we lack capital, that we lack, because they always say, well, black folks, this is what the woman was trying to argue with me. She said, well, black folks, we lack access to capital. I'm like, that's a bunch of crap, because if you go back and study, I have the numbers. I have the numbers from Booker T. Washington and the National Negro Business League going back to 1915, where he talks about the number of black-owned businesses. You can look at the minutes from the National Negro Business League, and they'll talk about all the black-owned businesses. Question for you, Juan. How many banks were loaning money to Negroes back in 1915? I'll wait. You go ahead and look it up. I don't think there was a whole lot of white banks who were loaning money to Negroes, but yet Negroes owned 50 banks. Negroes owned hundreds of farms. We owned 20 million acres of land.
That's crazy.
There were 10 million of us in 1910. So we went from 4 million of us in 1865 or 1860 rather. From 1860 to 1910, we went from 4.4 million to 10 million blacks. We went from 90% of us being slaves. 5 years later, we were free. And 45 years after that, black folks, 10 million black folks own 20 million acres of land. I ask you, how do we buy the land? I ask you, how do we own 75 bakeries? How did we own somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 different sawmills? 200 sawmills. How do we do that if we lacked access to capital? We obviously couldn't have had capital because we were just recently slaves. How do we do that? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it's because we pooled our resources, that you and I decided to say, hey, Juan, let's go in business together. I'll take my little bit. You take your little bit. We'll get a few other people to add their little bit. Now we have what? Capital.
Yep.
And we will go in together and buy this land. We'll buy this store. We'll buy this restaurant. We'll buy this hotel. And we'll own that. And we built that up. And we had a strong economy. And I know your cousin then will sit there and go, yeah, but the evil white man burnt it down like they did Black Wall Street. Man, shut up. You know what happened? Black Wall Street got rebuilt. But you didn't know that. Black Wall Street got rebuilt and continued to thrive for another 30 or 40 years. What destroyed Black Wall Street was basically integration and the Great Society movement.
Yep.
Black communities continued to thrive. So you could burn down. Listen, you can't blame it on the white man destroying things. Guess what? Europe got bombed the hell up, right? I mean, Europe was bombed up. There's parts of Europe that were completely destroyed. Nagasaki and Hiroshima were completely destroyed. Have you looked and seen what Nagasaki and Hiroshima look like today after an atom bomb hit? Socialism has done more damage to Baltimore than the atom bomb did to Hiroshima. That's on the real, brother.
Yeah. No, that's real talk. Wow. I mean, that's knee deep. That's knee deep. So, man, I mean, thanks for, giving my audience that view. I just have, cause I really wanted to get your take on, that subculture issue, because it was, I saw your post, and then I saw you on Fox recently. And, I just really interested to hear, your take on that. Now, just before I let you go, because I know I got you here late now. Looking at the El Paso and Ohio shootings, just briefly, this push for gun control and these red flag laws. Do you think that these red flag laws are going to actually be something that comes into fruition in form of a policy?
Brother, I hope not. I really hope not. That's a very slippery slope. And, as conservatives, we've been crying out about slippery slopes for a long time, whether it was the thing like pushing for gay marriage, right? And we said, hey, there's a slippery slope. watch out. Before you know, they're going to be sitting there trying to push for pedophilia. And people are like, oh my God, that's a terrible thing. You're such a bigot. How are you going to equate the two? And here's what's happening. Slowly but surely, they're starting to try to normalize pedophilia. Slowly but surely, they're starting to try to normalize transgenderism. As a matter of fact, they have normalized it where nowadays you'll lose your livelihood if you say anything negative about transgenderism. So there's that slippery slope. So there's already the framework laid. There's already the path we've seen is that they start passing these laws like red flag laws. What's it going to take for one of your neighbors who finds out that you're a conservative and says, I'm a little concerned about you? They call up, they're going to snitch on you, right? You heard about the term swatting? Yeah, where you've had plenty of incidents where Democrats have swatted. They basically have called in a false call and said, "Oh, my neighbor has drugs," or so on and so forth. And next you know, you're sitting in your house chilling, and next you know, a SWAT team busts down your door, and maybe you get killed or your dog gets shot, right? Because somebody made a false call because they're angry at you. Is not outside of the realm of possibility at all to think that what's it going to take is your angry neighbor. Maybe your brother-in-law who doesn't like you. Maybe, maybe who it doesn't matter. Any leftist, regressive, socialist-minded person decides to snitch on you, to lie on you, to bear false witness on you, and report you to the government. And next thing you know, they're trying to suppress and oppress your unalienable rights, among those the right to bear arms. You'll be guilty until proven innocent. That's what red flag laws will do. They will violate that right, the right to due process, and you will be guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, it literally eliminates due process. And I was on another radio show when this thing broke out as a guest, and I was debating this liberal, and this liberal said, "Well, to speed up due process." I said, hold on. There's no such thing as speeding up due process. Due process involves the courts. There's already laws that pertain to people that have mental health issues that keeps them from having firearms. Of course, a lot of people, that are ignorant about guns and the law don't know this. But if you're adjudicated by a court, if you're deemed mentally unfit by the courts, you're going in the Nixon database and you cannot own a firearm. Period. It's already law. So if you're going to have these red flag laws, this somehow, it may not be as fast as you want it to be, but it has to go through the courts. Somebody having your Second Amendment rights being encroached upon, in such a way, you have to go through the courts. And even then, Chris, I don't even trust the courts because you have a lot of leftist judges who has agendas as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, all it takes is what is the Ninth Circuit Court, right?
Ninth Circus.
What do they say is that, and being indicted, right? At the end of the day, listen, there's a saying that you can indict a ham sandwich.
Yep, exactly.
that an indictment alone means little to nothing.
Yeah.
Because it's not hard to indict someone. And especially in this day and age when we have activist judges. There's the reason why they're sweating over the idea of Trump being able to appoint judges. I want to say he's like 160 judges, is because they're scared. See, here's the thing. They're upset about this because they know they've been using the courts all this time to manipulate people. And to control things. So now all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, now you've become hip to our game and you're starting to, use the courts like we use the courts. And all we want, and listen, there's a lot of people, even among, I don't think that a lot of I'm not a big fan of Kavanaugh, and I'm not a big fan of John Roberts.
Oh, neither am I. No, absolutely.
They're not conservatives.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. They're nowhere near as conservative as they should be.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, John Roberts can kick rocks, man. I've been upset with him ever since the Obamacare ruling.
Oh yeah, I was upset with him way before that, but that was just the icing on the cake. I mean, he's very political. And you know, at the end of the day, conservatives that are really conservative want a judge to base. They don't want a particular policy outcome. They want the judge to, to uphold their judicial oath. You know, they want justice to be blind, to do it fairly. And there's been quite a few cases where, John Roberts has definitely sided with the liberals, and I believe it was for political reasons. Liberal judges are there to change things. They want to legislate from the bench, and they do it. You've seen liberal judges do it from the Ninth Circuit Court, and from all over. And if think about it, 2016, we elect Hillary Clinton. We're in another boat. You're talking about, these liberal judges that are up. Ruth Bader Ginsburg would be stepping down right around now, or might have already stepped down if Hillary Clinton would have been elected. So they know exactly what they want from the courts. They want to legislate from the bench. I've said it time and time again that anytime, what disgusts me is when you talk about the Supreme Court with liberals, and when you debate with these liberals on TV and on radio, oh, you guys stole a seat. Oh my God!
As if they're owed a seat on, listen, win the presidency, and you get to appoint whatever judges you want to appoint when you win the presidency.
Yep,
that's how it works. I mean, that's it. Did you win? Oh, you didn't win? Which it still makes me laugh my behind off when, like, I was telling my wife, I said, man, what I wouldn't give to have been in the room, a fly on the wall, to see when they realize, oh my God, we ain't gonna win. Just like, I mean, when it became apparent, like, oh my God, we're about to lose. After all the things we've done, all the manipulations, we about to lose.
Yeah.
Like, I would have just, man, I'd have paid money to be there.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Me too.
Because you just realize, like, and that's why they went into, oh crap, panic mode. And that's why for the past 2 years, we've been dealing with this temper tantrum, as Rush talks about. It's been a 2-year temper tantrum.
Yeah.
Trying to come up with everything, and slander President Trump, saying, oh, he colluded with. They knew good and doggone well there was no doggone collusion, but yet, they still keep running with it.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to distract, they're trying to deflect and distract from all the crap that they've done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's amazing. I hope, man, I hope President Trump and I hope Attorney General Barr are able to really start putting some people in jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath, but I'm hoping for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely. James Comey should be the first one.
Oh, you put that joker underneath the jail.
James Comey should be the first one. Andrew McCabe should definitely be. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It is absolutely ridiculous.
And Strzok and
Lisa Page. Well, Lisa Page got immunity. She got immunity for she actually cooperated. But
look, there's still there's got to be something that they can get got on, man. I mean, because they got to go. They got to go to jail. Yeah, some of them have got to go to jail because it's this conspiracy against America.
Yeah. Yeah. Just interesting enough, because I've been one of the things I do here at the Cure Radio Show is I'm on a ongoing search for news sources. A very good source that I've run into as of recent is the Epic Times,
I
and
like them. Yeah.
the Epic Times have a complete breakdown of the case of the whole Russian collusion thing from the jump. And even my wife, who doesn't keep up with politics, saw the chart that I had, and she's like,
Yep.
"Wow!" It's just like, "Wow!" Like, oh my god! Like, I cannot. This is very detailed. So, folks, shout out to the Epic Times. Go and check them out. I mean, they have good articles, good posting. There's a trial membership right now. I believe $1 for 30 days. One last thing, Chris. Jeffrey Epstein. He's no longer with us.
You know, people are like, well, I heard people say, well, was Trump one of the people who were out there doing things with him? I mean, I've heard that Trump's name was bandied about, but we all know beyond any reasonable doubt that Clinton was there.
Yep.
That he was buddies with Clinton.
Absolutely.
Because we know who Clinton is. We know how Clinton gets down. So, yeah, the fact that Clinton was there, this should come as no surprise. But I guess essentially they're like, yeah, this dude, it's time for him to, he has to be disappeared.
Oh, right? God.
Dead men tell no tales.
Oh,
and
God.
I just find myself sitting there thinking like the fact that we all even talk about the Clintons and their list of people being suicided. I mean, there's nobody else that we talk about that says, oh, they've been suicided.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the fact that we quote unquote joke about it, but we all know we're not joking. Like it's happened so many times that it's like, it's almost certain that this is what's taking place, even if it's only taken place one time.
Mm-hmm,
that's one time too many.
Yeah, definitely. It's pretty sick stuff. It's pretty sick stuff.
I also say this one last thing, man. Jeffrey Epstein is, I don't quite understand, and I don't want to understand. You're a multimillionaire. I mean, you can have all the adult women that you want.
I have no idea why. That's ridiculous. I get you.
All the adult women that you want who would willingly come along and engage in whatever activity you want to go along with. Why are you messing with little girls?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whether it's Jeffrey Epstein or whether it's R. Kelly, I don't understand. And I'm just like, dude, you got to go to jail.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I definitely don't understand that. With all that money and influence, and like you said, could have anyone he wants, and it's just a shame. It's just the whole thing. I feel bad for the girls, and ultimately justice would be served. I don't think the way that he died, look, if you're man enough to commit the crime, you should be man enough to face the consequences. And, whether he was suicided or he committed suicide or whatever, in that particular instance, justice wasn't served. But hopefully some of these young ladies can get, closure and, ultimately.
One, everybody's going to face, this is one of the things about being a Christian, is we realize that we will all face justice, whether it's in this life or the next one, but we will all face justice at some point in time. So his crimes, now I will say this. I tell people, as a Christian, here's what you need to understand, is that there's no crime that you could commit save for blasphemy, and there's a biblical definition of blasphemy. There's no crime that you can commit that cannot be forgiven if you have a sincere, repentant heart.
Mm-hmm.
So as terrible as his actions were, if he honestly, sincerely, humbly repented,
that's true.
he can have salvation. And I always leave that message with everyone, because there's people out there who feel that they've done terrible things that would prevent them from having, from being saved. They feel that God could never forgive them. And I'm like, you probably haven't, been a pedophile. You probably haven't been a rapist. And so you can be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You can be forgiven. You just have to humbly, sincerely repent and ask for forgiveness, just like the thief on the cross. That being said, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Jeffrey Epstein did not ask for forgiveness before he met his death, whether it was at his own hands or by the hands of somebody associated with the Clintons.
I honestly pray that he did, Chris. Whenever I honestly did, regardless how terrible things, those things were, I honestly, anyone that I see that pass or what have you, whether I know them or not, whether I like them or not, I honestly hope that they did. That's my prayer for everyone. Well, brother, man, I don't want to keep you too long. I just want to thank you again. We always have like the best sessions, the best calls. I definitely I wanted to get your take on that, and we're definitely going to have you back. Good luck. I know you'll probably be on Fox this week sometime soon.
Well, that's possible. Who knows?
Yeah. So I always enjoy you up there, especially on Tucker. I feel like you guys have a really good chemistry. You really do. So, I mean, we look forward.
You know what? Let me say this real quick, Juan. Black folks, or not just black folks, people in general, understand that the left has been attacking Tucker Carlson's advertisers.
Yep.
Okay, that Tucker's still the number 2 show on cable news by far. Okay, mm-hmm. The only one who's bigger show than him is Sean Hannity. But the left has been going after all the companies that advertise during his show. The left has been going after them. His ad dollars have dropped dramatically. And at the end of the day, TV is about advertising dollars.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a business.
So what we need to do is find out who Tucker's advertisers are and let them know. Either you go back to advertising on their show or we'll hurt your business, because they need to know we're the ones who actually support your business. The reason why you advertise on Tucker's show is because you wanted the dollars of people who support a show. So we need to let them know we are supporting your business, but if you let the left scare you into no longer advertising, you'll lose our business. Because you're not gaining the business of left. Here's the thing. The leftists are not, they're not saying, oh, you stopped voting, you stopped supporting Tucker, we'll support you. That's not what's happening. They just want to destroy. So anyway. Yeah, brother. Always a great conversation, man. Always great talking to you, Juan.
Definitely. I definitely appreciate another black brother who's schooled in the realms of, the culture, especially when we start talking about, the Marxism, cultural Marxism. I'm in depth in all of that stuff, but it's great. You have a gift for making the complex simple. So thanks for sharing with us tonight. I'll have you again, brother.
All right. Great talking to you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
This is The Cure.